moving ahead, as with the end of the session, we've had the first panel focus shift from pharma to healthcare industry, new trends, challenges, and opportunities. Indeed, it was a very interesting panel. And yes, we just witnessed another interesting panel, real estate and infrastructure sector, challenges and opportunities. With this, we now go forward with our next panel, that is on a very important theme, that is on power sector, with special focus on the renewable energy sector. And the focus now then moves from real estate and infra to renewable energy and other infra. Once again, everyone, we are there together for the Legal Era's flagship 11th annual Gen X Thought Leadership Business and Law Congress 2022, specially curated by Legal Era, Corporate Counsel Community, and Legal Era Global Business Lawyers. At this hour, we are delighted to have amongst us the moderator and our distinguished panelists for a very important session right now that is going to focus on the important aspects of the power sector with special focus on renewable energy sector. We are delighted and honored to welcome amongst us for this occasion, Kaadambari, Managing Director, United Chambers of Law. Kaadambari ji is an alumna of the prestigious Lady Shri Ram College for Women, Delhi, and Faculty of Law, University of Delhi. Currently the Standing Counsel, National Highway Authority of India, Additional Standing Counsel, New Delhi Municipal Council, Senior Counsel with Ministry of Law and Justice, Union of India. In the past, besides various multinationals, including a few Fortune 500 companies, she's also advised them, and she has also represented Indian Air Force, State of Haryana, Punjab State Electricity Board, Haryana State Industrial and Infrastructure Corporation, amongst others, where she has argued complex and significant matters of public importance with considerable success. Most recently, in the year 2021, Kaadambari ji has been honored by the India Forbes Legal Power List 2020 as India's top individual lawyer for excellence in law. Kaadambari ji, namaskar, greetings. Welcome to Gen X 2022. And ma'am, with your permission, I now call on the panelists for the session. We're delighted to have amongst us, and we welcome Parvesh Kheterpal, General Counsel, Head Legal, and CS Feedback Infra Group. He's an in-house counsel with strong business acumen, a seasoned power and infrastructure industry counsel with an experience of 20 years in the market. And some of his important previous works include, he has been part of team for sale acquisition deal of large thermal power project and few solar projects, dealt with international litigation, arbitration, exposure of setting up entities at various jurisdictions in Europe, US, South Africa. Welcome, Mr. Kheterpal. We are delighted to have amongst us Mr. Vikash Jain, Global General Counsel, Renew Power. Mr. Jain, a seasoned business leader, lawyer, executive MBA, Scholar of Excellence from ISB, India, with immersions at Wharton, USA, CEIBS, China, and company secretary, having rich and varied international experience of 25 years in the discipline of corporate, commercial, compliance, litigation, dispute resolution, amongst others. Welcome, Mr. Jain. We are delighted to have amongst us, and we welcome Mr. Pathik Arora, General Counsel, Senvion Wing Technology Private Limited. Mr. Arora has legal, secretarial, compliances, intellectual property and contracts management portfolio, an ardent legal professional with 2 decades of experience, years of advising and servicing the market leaders in various spaces like chemical, petrochemical, information technology, real estate, amongst others. Welcome, Mr. Arora. We welcome Mr. Vineet Bose, General Counsel, Nuvoco. Mr. Bose, enriched with an entrepreneurship approach, thinking creative apart from having an attitude that is leadership driven, and focused on business. He concentrates on litigation, strategy, effective management, standardization of contracts, policy advocating, amongst others. Currently, he heads the Nuvoco Group as General Counsel, and prior to that, he's also worked as General Counsel for Vedanta and Hindustan Zinc. So, on that note, let's get into the brainstorming for the very important topic, power sector, with a special focus on renewable energy sector. I request our moderator for the session, Kaadambari ji, to take the deliberations forward. Kaadambari ma'am, please.
Thank you so much, and thank you for the very, very warm welcome. And good evening, everyone. At the outset, I would like to thank Legal Era for hosting this extremely relevant session. And this is power sector with special focus on renewable energy sector. And it has a subset too. The subset is that the focus has shifted from the real estate and infra to renewable energy and other infra. So this is very relevant, not only from the environment perspective, but also from the industry perspective. So as we know that today, the world is still heavily reliant on fossil fuels and continues even subsidizing them, while subsidies are getting lesser. But the pollution, we all know, from the climate damaging greenhouse gases to life endangering particles, it has reached record levels. And we are already witnessing the effects of the climate change in all parts of the world. Now, since 2011, renewable energy, which has gained in importance, is growing faster than all other energy forms. Renewable energy had a record-breaking year in 2021, its largest growth ever, and this is expected to keep on growing, which perhaps makes it one of the fastest growing sectors as anticipated in the future years. In fact, we have no choice but to make this sector grow. And we have with us, as introduced to you, a panel of experts who are not only well entrenched in this sector, but these are the guys who are witnessing the live sectoral growth, facing the challenges, and we would want them to share their very candid perspectives with us. I start with Vineet. Vineet, so every year, India adds a city the size of London to its urban population, involving vast construction of new buildings, factories, transportation networks. Now, coupled with this is the government of India's focus on attaining power for all, which has accelerated capacity building addition in the country, giving power sector the potential of being the fastest growing and renewable sector, the fastest growing subsector in Infra. And the biggest gains are portended for renewable energy sector. Do you agree with me?
Yeah, Kaadambari, I hope I am audible just because yes, before, hi. So hi, first of all, I would just like to say hello to my very distinguished panelists, fellow panelists, and all the audience who are watching this show. It's a very, very, very nice initiative by Legal Hera, very pertinent issue also. I would say, before that, I would just want to say the focus when you say power for all, I would rather like to recalibrate it to say it is providing clean, affordable and reliable power. Because once you say the clean, affordable and reliable power, all three elements are equally important. It's not that the one element, the focus would be on one element, because even if it is a clean power, if it is not affordable, it won't make any sense. And at the same time, if it is not reliable, and reliability is quite pertinent when we talk about the renewable power and all that, because the power supply, you have the situation where you have a peak demand, but the power availability, even though generation capacity is maximum generation capacity is there, but still because of the intermittent nature of the supply, the power availability is in. So whatever the way that I see as a way forward is not something where you have an enabling regulatory changes. Of course, there is a lot of opportunity in terms of electricity distribution, operation, enabling renewables, manufacturing of renewable energy and energy storage. Not only this, of course, thrust is on the renewable sector, but at the same time, as we are still more than 72% is coal-based and more than 55% is the generation capacity is still thermal. So you cannot completely rule out thermal. And for that, again, when you require a stable supply of and quality coal supply and the coal mining parallelly or a private coal mining and all that, those sectors also equally needs to be taken care of when it comes to the larger theme when we say affordable, clean, and reliable power. So that, having said that, what again I would like to say that what I was saying is that if we see Electricity Act 2003 and some of the transformational changes which has happened, if I had to say something, what was really transformational was in way back in 2003, 2005 was the open access. The open access was one of the very important transformational change which has happened long back, a decade back. So some kind of a such similar kind of a transformational change has to happen, Kaadambari. Not only mere enablers. We have to get from some real transformational change to meet. Of course, the power sector is going to grow significantly. The way we have added our renewable capacity, with the way we had the India is growing, poised to grow. But the transformational changes in the regulatory framework, as we all know, that it is if electricity falls within the concurrent list, both state and center has the powers to frame rules, regulation, and all that. But having said that, when we say it's not mere adding to the capacity, it has to have a 360-degree kind of an approach. And because you have a kind of a plethora of state regulations, central regulations, authorities, like you have a SLDC, State Load Dispatch Authority, center, then you have a Central Electricity Authority, regulatory commissions. So all needs to act in a kind of a coherence for the, when we say that to meet that objective of a power for all or a affordable, reliable power, clean power, and at the same time, the development of the transmission infrastructure, where we actually significantly lacks the transmission connectivity and the transmission infrastructure. And not needless to mention, the technical and commercial distribution losses, that also adds to a significant thing. So all these needs to be taken care with from a regulatory standpoint. Not only from the regulatory standpoint, federal regulation is not only the solution or the central regulation. The state-wise regulatory overhaul is very much needed, which should be more on a transformation. And our country is quite capable. It's a misnomer that the central and state always there will be have a difference of opinion and all. But GST is a live example. I will still consider the GST the kind of a coordination which both in the legislative amendment has come in place, and kind of a federal structure, federal state structure which is working in GST, something like that. Probably in the energy sector is also very much required because it's a win-win situation for both. So I think probably I will take up some of the more points in this while I can hear my co-panelists. So this is, I just want to say this much before passing on the baton to my co-panelist. Yeah.
So very well summarized, Vineet. Thank you so much. So perhaps these three words, affordable, clean, reliable, this actually takes care of all the aspects which are the industry requirements as well as the requirement of the consumers and of the country itself. You've spoken about transformational changes, and of course, we will also discuss the changes in the regulatory environment, the changes, the requirements and the infra, and all those, combined aspects which would make it very strong and sustainable. Because we have to look at it sustainable, not only from the environment perspective, but also from the industry perspective, because you have to see it as sustainable to operate in the first place, with the ease of doing business, both technologically, regulatory wise, and all these aspects put together. So which brings me to the next question. In fact, because India has been deliberating about reaching the targets as per the Paris Agreement. In fact, India is stated to have fulfilled its commitments as per the Paris Agreement. As per the government reports, the country has stated to have achieved emission reduction of 28%, and against a target of 35% by 2030. Already they have reached this target. And India's avowed target is to reach net zero emissions by 2070, and to meet 50% of its electricity requirements from renewable energy sources by 2030. However, as you've already mentioned, the issues which are there, infra, regulatory, etc. But juxtaposed to this vision of meeting the targets, juxtaposed to this are the aging power plants and the inefficient ways of the traditional energy generation and the industrial practices. So they have put India at number 11 in the energy efficient ranking, for world's 16 largest economies. Would you like to comment on this also?
So I think inefficiency is very, very much there. Of course, both the state governments and the central government is trying to do its best. But when we have to see the inefficiency, we have to see it from a structural standpoint. So, for example, central government has brought a scheme like Uday scheme has been brought when the discoms were really bleeding and all that. So to cut down, but initially it shows some impact, but later on it didn't actually, because it was a mere of a debt restructuring kind of a scheme. So that debt restructuring will, unless and until the structural changes to bring discom out of the debt kind of a cycle by way of a billing, metering, collection, by way of a reduction in their technical and transmission commercial losses has to be is done. Those area cannot be addressed. So the inefficiency has various stages. So again, you have power deficit states, you have power surplus states. Every state has its own regulation and all that. The way it is that let's say one state maybe have a very surplus wind power, but there is no mechanism, coherent mechanism, so that you can have one state's weakness can be compensated or complemented by the strength in the generation of the another state. So that mechanism, that's the kind of a single grid, single market kind of a system is not there, which has to be developed. Otherwise, the bleeding will keep on happening. So some kind of those regulatory change for inefficiency is there. I do agree, but these inefficiency has to be addressed. Of course, when it comes to the discom level, specific regulations is there, need to come, how to ensure that discoms are really profitable, whether the privatization, the way it has been done in some of the metros, whether the privatization is the answer. It may not be a clear-cut answer. Everything cannot be it has to be seen from a state's perspective, also from the employment perspective, also all from a what you call social obligation of the government, from that obligation also. But the fact is that you have plethora of levies which are inbuilt, like you have transmission charges, additional surcharge, cross subsidy, unscheduled interchange charges, parallel operating charges. So many charges, levies built in it increases the inefficiency. And at the same time, so whether the answer is that you have to distribute rural load, urban load separate, or industrial load separate, that could be there. Or from a renewable standpoint, whether rooftop solar policy or or in future things like microgrid or something like that would be the answer to remove the inefficiency. But what is important is that digitization, automation, grid related. So a lot of structural changes has to be done. I do agree that a lot of inefficiency is there, because I have read some data. I don't know how correct that data is, but it has been there that 20 to 25% of the generation is remain unbilled by the discom because of various systematic losses. So it's nothing but an inefficiency. Maybe again, the second very important reason for an inefficiency is that there is no long-term horizon actually. When you say long-term, because you have to invest in the transmission infrastructure and all that, but for that you need investment and at the same time patience. But you need, every government is 5 years and all that, they have to also take the populist consideration in mind. So if the tariff can all of a sudden, if there is an increase in tariff, that also has to be subsidized. So whether direct benefit transfer is an answer or not, which all these things are there too, but inefficiencies are there, probably. But my answer to is that it has to be addressed to very calibrated transformational reforms, which is duly aligned with the state government and all.
Thanks, and thanks so much, Vineet. I think just to add on to what you're saying, the sector, because it's relatively new, so I feel even the authorities, even the governments are still grappling with the issues which are coming up, and the traditional methods. Of course, the subsidies have been a major issue in all welfare states, including India. You have also stressed on reforms by the state. In fact, I will put up to some of you about the center-state equation, the policy making. And you have rightly stressed on the levies, the issue of 25% unbilled energy which is going out. But I guess the sector is now taking a turn towards maturity, because in the recent times, as you've seen, the Electricity Act, in the initial one, then there have been subsequent amendments. There are bills also which are pending. I believe that the authorities, the regulatory authorities, the government, the center government is waking up to the requirements which may be there for the industry, which of course have to make it sustainable. So you had also mentioned about the discoms which are facing unbilled revenues. While I was just reading some articles that the discom crisis situation, as per some articles, is also is disproportionately discussed. While they are getting, when ultimately the unbilled revenues are also, maybe there are gains when you see there is a long-term gestation period for perhaps for a discom to start making profits. So this next question I'll put up to Vikash. Vikash, I wanted to ask you this, that while the power sector has already shown huge gains, renewable sector specifically, but the discoms are projecting a crisis situation. So the backdrop of discoms is that traditionally they have been the weakest link in the electricity value chain, as Vineet said, plagued by low collections, rise in power purchase costs. But power purchase costs, if you can correct me if I'm wrong, that has gradually come down, with the a mix of traditional and renewable sources. Then, of course, the inadequate tariff hikes, subsidy disbursement, and mounting dues, as Vineet had pointed out from the government departments. So what would you say? Where do we foresee the discoms crisis, if you want to call it crisis? But from what I've seen is that there is also a disproportionate division of even areas which discoms are looking at. What do you have to say about the perceived crisis? I'm saying perceived because we really cannot say whether the crisis is there in the true sense, or it is just a matter of time when they just go through a curve and this is sorted.
So thank you, Kaadambari, and good evening to all the fellow panelists and all the audience.
Good evening to you.
Discoms are definitely undergoing financial stress. But the bulk of this financial stress, if I may say, is self-inflicted harm. The inherent business model of the discoms is robust and ensures that cost recovery with profits happens. However, it is the populist measure or the practice of giving free power to certain sections of the society that becomes a shot in the leg. That is a self-inflicted harm, if I may call it, by the so-called owners of the discoms or the authorities behind the discoms. And this ultimately causes the discoms to effectively limp, if I may use those words. Their financial stress forces them to delay the payments to the power generators. And worst still, they also manufacture disputes. With all humility, if I may say that, they get into the tendency of manufacturing disputes with the intent to deny or at the very least delay the payments to the power generators. So this has a spiral effect. The stress from the discoms now moves to the power generators. Because of the payment defaults, we have seen several cases in the industry where power generators having written PPAs with a 30 days payment cycle or a 60 days payment cycle, having unpaid dues or debtors running into few hundreds of days. So that's something which makes them unsustainable. And at some point of time, they effectively go bankrupt. We all have seen in the last few years, especially after the advent of IBC, bulk of the stress has happened in the power industry and thermal power industry, to be very specific. Power plants which have been created at a cost of 7 crores, 8 crores, 9 crores a megawatt are being sold at a distress value of a crore, crore and a half, or even 50 lakhs per megawatt. And there are no takers for it. It's effectively becoming a dead business. Otherwise, seeing a situation where the greenfield cost of creating an asset is $1 million and there are no takers for $0.1 million of the same asset at a distress valuation is unheard of. However, when we talk about the problem, let's also talk about the possible solutions. So in my humble opinion, the solution lies in running the discoms as a pure commercial organization. This can happen with or without privatization, not necessarily privatization. Because privatization is not the key to all solutions or all problems. The subsidy or the cost of free power should be borne directly by the relevant government, which announces it. The discom should not be made to bear the cost of that power. They simply sell it on a commercial basis. Whatever is the bill, the recipient of that power or the consumer of that power has to pay it. The subsidy, if the government wants to do that as a policy or free power or whatever it is, has to be paid directly by the government to those consumers. And I assume for a moment deserving consumers who actually need that subsidy. So we are not getting into that political landmine space as to who deserves it and who doesn't. The second aspect of it focuses around the transmission and distribution losses, which Vineet also mentioned. What I call them, while this is a great coined term of T&D losses, but 80% of it, if not more, of it is actually theft of electricity, masked theft of electricity, or nothing but free power in another name. That has to be curtailed. That has to be curtailed. If the discoms are given a free hand and the political interference is reduced, trust me, these T&D losses will be in single digits in a matter of days or months, not years. However, because of the political interference and regulatory interference and the host of other issues, which we all are aware of, it's difficult for that to happen. So the solution that I am proposing is that with the regulatory support and stringent punishments or penalties for violators, the system should be institutionalized. Discoms who fail or which fail to achieve a single digit T&D number in terms of percentage should be privatized mandatorily. There should be consequences which follow in terms of a process. Today, most of the activities, while the regulatory desire is there, but most of the activities do not see the light of the day, because if someone does not do it, there's no consequence that follows. They can go to the regulatory commission and say, sorry, I couldn't do it. I have 100 reasons why I could not do it. And because they are a government held organization, because they are a discom, because they are in public utility, there's no consequence which follows. The country cannot work like that. This has become a rotten system, so to say. So to correct the rot, some examples have to be said. The list can go on, and I can speak on this subject for long enough. But the short point that I want to make is that if we can set the discom structure right, which is the weakest link in this entire value chain, bulk of the issues in the power sector would come to rest. Back to you, Kaadambari.
Thanks, Vikash. Thanks. And I can perceive your distress with the system. Definitely. I can feel the pain that you feel at the entire vicious circle, if I may say so, from discoms to the power generators. And I would probably add the frustration with the systems, the way even courts and the commissions, the tribunals, the delay that is entailed over there, and there is no hope of retrieval of your dues sometimes in reasonable time before you get bankrupt. So one sees those cases and how they go on and on. And you're absolutely right. So recently we have seen certain legislations, for instance, the Arbitration Act. Again, it's become recently it's been given a lot of strength and power. It's been made efficient, time bound. Similarly, I think power sector is is badly in need of some such complete overhaul of the regulatory system. And as you've rightly said, there has to be accountability by people who or by you can put it either on private sector, public sector, the government, but ultimately it is driven by individuals. So I think there should be very heavy penalties on people who are actually responsible for bringing about a distress kind of situation, when especially this is a public function, this is a welfare function. So this is, in fact, the High Court and the Supreme Court have labeled a supply of electricity as a fundamental right. Even a trespasser is entitled to receive it. So therefore, it must get the due attention from our legislature, from everybody concerned, and the implementation, of course. So, which brings me to the next question. What would you like to comment on? What would your suggestions be for the existing policies which are there, including the bills which are there? You know, there are proposals to rectify a lot of issues that the sector is facing. So can we say that we are somewhere on the anvil of achieving a comprehensive statutory regulatory system, or is it very distant? According to you, how do you perceive it? And also, what is your solution-based perspective with regard to this?
Thank you, Kaadambari. Very relevant question. The government, especially the central government, and more specifically, the Ministry of Power and the Ministry of New and Renewable Energy, have taken various steps recently and in the past to revamp the entire power sector. They have done their bit in pieces as well as in terms of structural reform, and more so focused on the renewable sector. However, the results of that have not emerged in real sense. We have seen a lot of capacity addition so far as renewable power is concerned. But the stress which was felt by the thermal power sector post the 2003 era, 2003 to 2010 era, where they were kind of mushrooming up, and then suddenly the stress built up and things started going south. Similar stress is also building up in the renewable sector. Some things contributed to the policy and some things to the macroeconomic factors. For long, we have seen a commodity cycle in the solar and the wind space, which was only going south. So the tariffs were there to decline. That was the universal truth. For the last few years, we have seen that tariffs can revert back going north, because the commodity cycle behind that has reverted northwards. So coming back to the regulatory space, and I would by intent hold myself away from the financial interventions from the government side, because that's something which is a more of a policy measure. So financial benefits, financial tax incentives, custom benefits, those are, I'm keeping it aside for a moment, because they are more direct and compensatory, and they have an immediate direct effect. But there are a host of other things on the regulatory side which can be done, and some of which are being done. So first thing first, Vineet talked about the transformational change as a requirement, and I agree with him. Government has been trying that for long. The Electricity Amendment Act in various shapes and forms has been pending from 2014 onwards. We are in 2022. For the last 8 years, it has not seen the light of the day. Only the year behind that bill changes. Now the latest draft is the Electricity Amendment Bill 2022 instead of 2014 or 17 or 19 or 20 or whichever version. It promises a lot of changes, a lot of structural changes. But the fact of life is it requires a lot of political willpower to see it through. Not that the government does not have it. But the problem lies in the fact that electricity being a concurrent subject, the states as well as the center have the power to legislate upon it. And how does that power sharing work in the real life is the real issue. X says do this, Y says I am not doing it. Doesn't work. So we can talk at length. We can probably have a separate session on the Electricity Amendment Act, but that's not the objective. But I'll talk about a few solutions, non-tariff based solutions, which are kind of structural changes. And my focus would be predominantly on the renewable side, taking clue from the subject matter that was given for the panel. So few of them. The first is around the fact of shortening the period of construction. And ultimately, all of the suggestions that I make would boil down to either clean or affordable or reliable and sustainable power. So one of the three, for sure, because ultimately that's the common objective. And there's no difference of opinion on that. So today, when a power plant, a renewable power plant is built, especially when it comes to wind and solar, it has large land footprints. Land in India, cumbersome process of acquisition, 20 or 25 approvals it takes for the first brick to be laid on that ground. So if the government, through an SPV or through an organization, can create a land bank with all the relevant approvals and reduce this cycle from a 36-month cycle potentially to a say 18-month cycle, because the construction time is not fast, not too much. So if that project cycle can be accelerated, the construction cost in terms of the carrying cost comes down heavily. And that benefit can be passed on in terms of reduced tariff. The second part of it, today, globally, bulk of the supply of renewable power equipments, whether it's solar modules, whether it's PV cells, whether it's WTGs, is happening one way or the other through China. Directly or indirectly through China. So very heavy dependence on China as a country, as a source of those materials. That cannot be eliminated overnight. Government has been taking a lot of steps towards domestic manufacturing of these. WTGs is happening in this country, but solar side, a lot of initiatives have been taken. Government has introduced PLI scheme, and a lot of benefits are being passed on. So that's another area which will help reduce dependence on the cyclical movement over China on the commodity cycles. So strategically, that would be a big advantage for the industry. The third suggestion would be about synchronization of the evacuation network, the transmission network with the COD of the generator. COD is nothing but the commercial operation date. As is the case in any project, you predict something will come up on so and so date, but the reality based on ground situation changes. It's ultimately a prediction. It may happen, it may not happen. Today, the risk between the start of the transmission charges, so to say, and the start of the project generation itself causes a lot of financial stress, and that cost is built into the project. That risk is inbuilt into the project from the renewable side. If government, without any tariff interventions, without any financial cost, can ensure that that synchronization is achieved through a regulatory intervention, I am sure the industry would be happy to de-risk that from the pricing and pass on that benefit to the consumers. The visibility of the pipeline of the bids. We all have said that we want to go 500 gigawatts by 2030. Stated vision. But where are the building blocks of that? How much in 2030? How much in 29, 2028, 2027, 2026, and back to 2022 and 23? Do we have the breakup of each of them year-wise? Do we have a detailed plan around it? Because if there is a plan around it, the generators or the people who have to put up the projects around it would have larger visibility. Today, you cannot raise capital without that visibility. As everyone knows, these are capital intensive projects. Capital in this world is not cheap, not easy. There is a lot of planning to be done. You can't raise capital early enough and keep it unutilized. And you can't be late in the race. You need it when you need it. So if there is a visibility around the bid pipeline in clear terms, at least for the next 3 to 5 years, that establishes a lot of credibility and de-risks it. I am not saying that you are guaranteeing as a government, they should guarantee that you, Mr. X, will get so and so bid. No. It's a competitive environment. People have to win it through auction. A fair, transparent mechanism. But some visibility is important. We talked briefly about payment security. Payment security is a must. One party defaults, one state defaults, one state tries to renegotiate its deal, because when they did the renewable projects at that given point in time, the tariffs were high because the cost of those projects were high. So nobody was to be blamed for that. But being opportunistic today, they want to renegotiate it. So they end up not paying the buyers. What happens? The entire industry, that 1 or 2 players go into a stress. But the entire investing community takes notice of it and says, here is a country, here is a state which is trying to renegotiate the contract. Tries to build in that risk in the project cost itself. What happens ultimately is a higher cost for the tariff and ultimately the consumer. So if these risks are reduced, ultimately the consumer, the end consumer, the people, we the people, ultimately stand to benefit. And here I'm not emphasizing that you allow the private sector or the generators to keep that money for themselves as profits. What I'm suggesting is give them that freedom to pass it on. Give them that assurance that they will not, the rules of the game will not be changed after the game is played. Have a sanctity of contract. Have an enforcement mechanism which is timely and robust. A stable regulatory mechanism and a predictable regulatory mechanism is extremely important. We have seen many cases where the PPAs or other tariffs, other non-direct tariffs are introduced post the PPA signatures. When the person or the generator on the other side has no choice left. He has put the money on the ground, the PPAs for 25 years, 30 years, and the rules of the game, the economics have changed. Because suddenly the government believes that this person is making too much money than he should be. Rightfully or wrongfully, I don't know. Nobody cares to investigate. So that is important. The rules of the game should be changed, if at all, prospectively and not retrospectively, for projects which have already been commissioned or which are at higher stages of commissioning. One nation, one grid. Vineet briefly mentioned about it.
Yes.
It's an important element, very important element. I'm conscious I'm overstepping on time, so I'll kind of stop here and pass on the baton back to you, Kaadambari.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Vikash. I think You touched upon all, I think, all the relevant points very, very comprehensively. And as you rightly said, again and again, we are getting the same underlying refrain that there is no contractual sanctity because the enforcement is not either expeditious or stable enough. And of course, the host of issues, we really hope that there is an intensive private and government engagement, because now the issues and gradually the sector has reached a stage where it can be stated to be mature enough to tackle all these issues. But yes, an urgent intervention is required if this sector has to be given the impetus that the government wants. So you've touched upon, briefly about certain issues which solar energy based units, they were facing the problems. And since India, we have plenty of sun, like wind. So this I think I would like to take this up with Parvesh with regard to the renewable energy sources like solar panels. As Vikash has just mentioned, they need large lands, approvals, time-to-time maintenance, and there is a high risk of failure. And then, of course, contractual sanctity of PPPs also that is not being adhered to. So, so I would like to just put it to Parvesh. Parvesh, what according to you are the most efficient renewable energy sources? If you look at solar, what are the plethora of efficient fuels, and what would work in the given system? What do you find working under the given system? Because the resources are there, the direction is there. Of course, the policy needs to be tightened further, which we are hoping will become more intensive in the near future. So can you please throw light on what are the different sources which according to you will be very successful to take up as projects, renewable energy projects?
Yeah, thank you, Kaadambari, and good to hear Vikas and Vikash and Vineet. They have covered very well articulated details on the solar side. I know Vikash is doing so many solar assignment in his office, being the Renewable in the one of the biggest solar park player. So my experience, in fact, Kaadambari, we have seen solar sector, like I've seen solar sector from the year 2009-10, when solar was new for India, as well as industry was new for India, no doubt. So we have seen at that time there was 1 megawatt was the limit. We have seen projects with a 1 megawatt. Even at my organization at Lanco, we had few projects with a capacity of 1 megawatt, 2 megawatt at that time. That was the maximum capacity seen at that time. Then I remember Jawaharlal Nehru National Solar Mission was introduced by Government of India, Ministry of New and Renewable Energy. They introduced, I remember under that UPA government has the target of 20 gigawatt only. And when the government changed and the new government came, they have increased that target 2,200 gigawatts. So because they found that this is feasible. I agree with Vikash when he told that the 2030 target of 500 gigawatt is there, but we don't have the visibility on the pipeline. But at that time, government assumed that 100 gigawatt is achievable. And no, though we have reached to a good amount of gigawatt achieved in India. So at that time, again, it was 5 megawatt was the capacity of each project, where one company or one group can apply only 5 megawatt per project. It was not allowed to go beyond 5 megawatt. So that was the scenario in 2010-11, where we have bid few projects and few of the power developers have done that. So the issues are the same, which already been touched by my co-panelists, that the land acquisition is always a challenging state in various states of the India. And then no doubt all approvals need to be obtained before you put a first brick or you start the project. And at that time, it was very new. The dependency was more on China, and we have to import most of the all solar module and other product VOP from the China only. So the government came with, I'm coming with a scenario how that industry developed and how we have reached to this stage and our learning and now what we are planning for the same. When the government change the concept and then give the incentives to develop or to establish your own unit of solar module manufacturing in India. So they have incentivized the companies who are manufacturing modules in India. And even we have not reached to that capacity what is required for us if we see the solar power generation in India. Even at this stage also, module, the cell manufacturers are there, but not up to the capacity where the module assembling units are there in India. So if you are assembling your modules in India, but you need cell, and you need cells certainly from outside India. There are few cell producers, cell manufacturers in India as well. But ultimately for cell manufacturing, they need wafer. I think the capacity of wafers in India is almost, is very less if you say. So they have to be dependent on outside Indian countries. So the one point that if we want to go big in solar, that we have to go, I believe that solar is the best source because as you know, we have 300 plus days clear sun in India. And that's the main strength for us to go for the solar power. And in last 2014 to 2022, we have seen a tremendous growth in the increasing the megawatt scale in India for the solar power. Wind as well, but solar is has increased in a big way. Solar is close to wind, what I understand as the data available with me. So then we have reached to a stage where we have started manufacturing, assembling module, manufacturing cells and wafer import from India. Nowadays, also if we see that if we are importing cells from outside India, we have to pay some 25% duty on those cells, and we are importing modules. The duty is 40%. So at that time, coming back to the stage that when initial projects came in Gujarat with a cost of 17 crore per megawatt installation cost, and the PPA was for 15 rupees per unit, and reduced after 13 years with 5 rupees per unit, that has come down to somewhere 4 crores, 3 crores, and even 1.5, 2 crores per megawatt installation cost for the solar project. But coming to this taxation and the duty levied on the products for the solar project, that is again increased from somewhere 3 crore plus or 3.5 crore, 4 crore per megawatt, where the tariffs are same. So if we are going with the reverse bidding concept of the solar power, and that's the open process, and everyone has to win the project by bidding under the auction. So the prices are getting down. Even we were worried that these companies will survive. After a couple of years back, we were worried on the aspect when the companies are coming so low tariff that will survive in future or not. But good, the companies are surviving because the scale has increased. They have reached to such a scale. So coming to your exact question that what are the power, and one point I would like to add, at that time there was a concept of solar thermal projects in India. So I was, if you will ask from me, I was very bullish, and our organization at that time and the group was very bullish for the solar thermal project. Solar thermal project is nothing that the fuel you are using is the solar energy, other than instead of using gas or the coal. And with the solar energy, you are running the turbine. With the heat, you are generating the heat, and with the heat, you are running the turbine, and turbine is generating power. And in 2010, we have conceptualized a project with 4-hour storage to run the turbine with the heat, solar heat, so that it can generate the power after sun is down, and then you can have 4-hour power generation from that turbine. But being a solar, so much solar available in India, but the DNI of that solar is not fit for solar thermal project. That was another disadvantage in India, because that is in the Arabian countries that projects are still successful, but India that are not successful. Another way of getting those projects failed, because the cost of those concentrated power, heat power project is around 7 to 8 crore per megawatt, which for the other project is 3 to 4 megawatt. So I understand solar has a big scope, considering if government is coming with so many policies, regulatory change. And my only suggestion for that is government should increase or should give incentive to have the manufacturing hub for the solar module in India. If that stage comes, if like the other countries, China has developed themselves in the last couple of years, and Indian government is trying for the same. If that stage comes in India, certainly we will be the number one, though we'll be the number one and covering all these 3-4 countries above us in the solar power generation and making the good export of solar modules from India. And I always believe solar is a good source of like renewable energy in India. Hydro, I don't always, like if you will ask from me, I will not always prefer not to go with the hydro, because more on the environment issues are there in hydro, but solar being the more environment safe is the best energy for the solar for the renewable power in India.
Thank you. Thanks, Parvesh. So basically, I'm just hoping that the changes are there on the anvil from the government side to basically make the solar energy projects and companies proliferate. You have stated about the scaling of demand, and so the reduction of costs also, because that was something in my mind, that because with the coming of renewable sources, the cost of electricity has also is also coming down, right? But when you look at the old thermal, I think there is also an issue where the state governments are forced to continue with the traditional thermal projects as well, which somehow is maybe because of their employment issues and various other policy concerns. So therefore, the full gains to the public are not really coming. However, in the future, what would you say? In fact, you had spoken about certain measures for solar sector that are required from the government. Do you see they're already being implemented, or you are expecting them to be implemented? Parvesh, am I audible? Yes.
Yeah, you are audible, Kaadambari. I don't know. Parvesh, you are on mute. Parvesh, you are on mute.
So I think we can go to Pathik. I can see Pathik is also. Pathik, you are there?
Yeah, sorry. Like I think I was unmuted by the host only. So
Okay.
So in fact, like I cannot stop myself here, Kaadambari, like just to add few points on which Vikash has already touched, because being in the same sector, as you know, I have worked with the renewable sector. Now I am on the other side of the table where we are helping the DISCOM to reduce their losses. So I was just quickly few seconds, I was just wanting to share data on that. On the DISCOM side, like we are the franchisee for few of the DISCOMs in India, in Meghalaya, in Tripura, in Bhubaneswar. We worked in in Madhya Pradesh as well on few of the projects where we are running the system as franchisee, where we are buying power from the DISCOM, and ultimately aim is to reduce the losses, AT&C losses of the DISCOMs, and increase their revenue per unit for the same. So I was just wondering, because we are working with the DISCOM information now that is privatized with the Tata. So in the data says, which Vikash has briefly touched, data says that all these DISCOMs have more than 21% of losses. That AT&Cs are more than 21%, and even few of the state, 8-9 state are more than 30%. So average is 21%. So it's not easy to reduce those 21% losses in a day. So DISCOMs are bleeding, no doubt. But what is the reason? In fact, if I see the numbers, 450 plus DISCOMs divisions are there among those DISCOMs where these losses are more than 35%. So we cannot see the immediate change in these DISCOMs revival. That will take some time, and that is ultimately impact on these power generation, power producers not getting the money, dispute, and bringing all this system into mess.
Parvesh, sorry for interrupting. Do you think there is scope for privatization in the future? How can private investment help to or privatization of the some of the DISCOMs? Would it help? I think again, Parvesh has been muted. I would request the host to please unmute Parvesh.
Thank you. Thank you.
I hope that's not a way to say hurry up.
I can understand Dr. Amna is there just not to speak much, but they have to close it at 5. 5 is there. So I will quickly take not much time, but I will certainly say that I can suggest few of the changes required or the steps required, and few have already been taken by the government quickly on those parts. Like I have 2-3 points I have specifically noted down that government initiative to make the discoms, already they have privatized few of the discoms, union territory they have privatized. That is the one step they have already taken. And even competition in retail supply of electricity, which is another aspect which is proposed in the electricity bill. If there is a competition, like parallel license has been given to the private party, and like telecom sector, you have the competition to you have the competitive price of tariff. Certainly that will revive this sector. Smart metering national program of Government of India was another good step where you can bring all transparency. You can see what is the total consumption required, and the actual billing will be there. That is another good initiative taken by the Government of India, which helps in this. Coming to the changes required, including private sector participation in the DISCOM, yes, there are few structural changes required, which I understand, which will help this DISCOM revival or the revival of the complete power system, which will the greater autonomy should be given to the state-owned DISCOM. They have to, though they have few rights available, but they have to given more autonomy to decide on the things. Franchising model, which we are doing, or the unallowed under the Electricity Act, if they cannot privatize the complete DISCOM, they can have control with them. But the franchising model is there, where they are incentivizing the franchisee to increase the revenue cost. Control will be with DISCOM, but someone is working, private party is working with them to reduce the losses. Regulatory change are also required. Tariff increase is not there. We have seen there is no tariff increase in the system from so many years. Maybe political motive behind that. But when the cost is increasing, when your manpower cost is increasing, when your manufacturing production cost is increasing, that should be increased. Fairly reflect the actual cost and the variable cost in generation of power, and direct benefit incentive may be the another thing where we can have the regulatory reform changes. Operational reforms is the another thing where we can find we can help us to increase the efficiency of the DISCOM, like reducing power procurement costs. Like they don't have such a robust system to procure the power in such a way that they ultimately reducing their overall cost for procurement. Billing efficiency and collection efficiency, power is being supplied to the household and the industry, but no one is sending the bill to them, and no one is going to collect the bill. Again, the political motive, but if there is no collection, ultimately that is going to be lost. They are not catching the theft or the misuse. Again, the political, I can say, like, because states are run by their individuals, so they are not taking that incentive. Other good point is agriculture demand management. So there is no agriculture demand management system in our country. The agriculture specialists are using so much electricity without meter. We have no idea how much power is being used by them, how much power we require for the system. If there is a metering and the demand is analyzed, certainly we can improve the efficiency. Last but not the least, on managerial reforms, that we should have DISCOMs officers responsible for their job. They should be given target like private sector. If they don't do, they should be penalized. Then certainly with the structure, regulatory, operation, and managerial reforms, that will certainly change the scenario of our DISCOM. And yes, your question. And out of these, 50% things can be done by the private sector. If they introduce PPP or the private sector to come in this franchising model or the privatization of the DISCOM, that is going to make this sector a change in a big way, and good for the end user. End user will be benefited.
Thank you. Thanks, Parvesh. In fact, when you were referring to the agricultural sector or DISCOMs giving, doing the billing and the recoveries, etc., I am reminded of an instance where there was a DISCOM in Orissa, and certain locations were seen as risky by the staff, because there were instances where the people in the rural side had actually, the staff which would go for the recoveries, they would be either, there was a threat of bodily harm, and they were even they were put in some room and the door was closed, and there were some cases. So that's another risk. Probably none of the panelists
Actually, no, in fact, we were franchisee in Odisha, and initially few months we were not allowed to enter in those villages for billing or for checking their houses that they are
Yes.
using the meters. Of.
Yes, so I've seen certain instances like that. So that's yet another risk for the sector, which is beyond the government, which is just the landscape, how it is. And probably again the regulatory regime is to be blamed for it, because they've been got so used to the subsidies that they don't want to pay now. They think it has to be, it's a matter of right to get free electricity, right? So thank you so much. Yeah, it was a very detailed and very specific, very specific inputs from you. Thank you so much. And so you have, and I think Vikash or Vineet, one of them also have stressed on state autonomy. Rather, in fact, recently the Union Power Minister has come down very heavily on some state governments who he felt were not taking adequate steps to address a worsening electricity crisis in the country. So, Pathik, this is my question to you. As juxtaposed to state autonomy, would you feel that centralizing everything and then having, center focused small centers all over, would that not be a better solution rather than leaving it to the states, because the state governments are more likely to be populist? So over to you, Pathik. Can the host please unmute Pathik? The host,
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, hi.
Hello.
So Kaadambari, well, centralizing everything may have its own challenges, and especially because because you essentially mean that maybe moving the power as a sector from concurrent list to central list.
Yes.
Right. This will definitely have its own challenges, but and this of course we all know, this may actually not happen. So I think what we're talking about is could be a very hypothetical situation that we're talking about. If we knowing the political dynamics of the country, that may not happen, and even if that happens, there'll be so much of pressure on center that even center may not really be ready right now to take that pressure on.
True.
Yeah. So but having said that, when I talk about more of renewable energy, and there definitely are certain aspects which are controllable, certain which are not controllable, certain which are controllable but highly inefficient, if even if we go to control those. But there has to be a complete focus, complete alignment between the center and the states, if we really want to achieve, honestly, even substantial portion of the target that we have set for 2030. Right now, as I see, the targets definitely are enormous. Are pretty steep. Where are we? I think we are very far behind. And by 2030, if this is going to be the speed, efficiency, effectiveness of where we are really going with, I don't see we achieving more than 50-60% of it. And I have, of course, have reasons to say. As I said, some are controllable, some are not controllable. I rather would focus more on controllable factors. While of course, we are as a nation are working on, and most of my panelists who have the experience, and who all have the experience of or veterans of power sector, I should say. I mean, they all would agree that we have certain challenges on continuous flow of power from renewable energy right now, and that's why we need a right mix of conventional and non-conventional sources of energy. Focusing right now on renewables, the biggest problem we have in renewable is the informed source of power. When I say informed source of power, what it means is that there's a lot of power that is generated but is not used because it gets wasted, and there are certain times of the day when the power cannot be generated. So there is a huge gap, and then the balancing of grid becomes a challenge. Like wind, wind doesn't remain constant throughout the day or throughout the night. Also, unfortunately, in India is not a very high wind terrain, so to say. We only have about 7-8 wind-rich states in the country. So we can, while there is, as of now, there's huge scope of putting the turbines, because we have the infrastructure to put a lot of turbines and generate a lot of energy in those states. But then those states have not each state has been really focusing on that, in the sense that they have not yet, while the discussions are on, but they have not yet come up with the right set of policies and framework for renewable energy. Solar, of course, has its own challenges with with a country like India. You don't have sun at least 12 hours in the cycle of 24 hours. You must have heard about storage. So storage or battery storage is definitely is now being talked about. Hybrid models are being talked about, both conventional, non-conventional, and more so solar and wind hybrid, which SECI also is coming up with bids now. Coming to storage is definitely going to help and boost the regular flow or supply of energy into the grid. The problem right now with storage or the battery is the cost of generating electricity goes out of the roof. It hits the roof. We have not, as of now, been able to cut down on that costs. I think that's where our thirst or focus should be, as far as renewable energy is concerned right now, to spend a lot on R&D to cut down on the cost of storage, the cost of batteries, so that the energy we generate or produce is not wasted and can be used or put to the grid when the renewable sources are not generating, or the time during which the generation is low. So that is one. Second issue is about while we may think that center and state, center and states which are not governed by the center, the same government which is in the center, are misaligned on few aspects. Unfortunately, there are certain states even which have the same government are not aligned completely, or of course, and I don't blame them from a perspective that each one is trying to protect its own interest. But unfortunately, I think what's happening in that game is that we as a nation are definitely losing big time on time and efforts and efficiencies and effectiveness, etc., etc. Just to give a small example, please. As SECI, which is the central agency which comes, which is responsible for awarding or setting up of projects, it comes up with bids. There have been bids. Now we are at SECI 13 as far as wind bids are concerned. But the bids or the PPAs which were signed, or the projects which are awarded as early as 2018, 2019, SECI 3, SECI 4, SECI 5, even those projects have not been completed, while the timelines for completion of those projects was only about 18 months. Of course, there have been various factors, but one bigger factor was one state suddenly realized that if a state signs a PSA or a power supply agreement with SECI, it only gets a small pie of revenue, and the majority goes to the center because these are central bids.
I think there's a little network issue. Pathik, there's a network issue.
My land for setting up of central projects. I should come up with my own and what it did was it suddenly, while the projects were
Pathik, we can't. You're not.
Okay. Is it better now, Kaadambari?
Yes, now it is.
Is it better now?
Yes.
Now,
Yes.
Kaadambari.
Earlier you were perfectly fine.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. We can. Please continue. I think we'll just wait for Pathik to rejoin. Yeah, there it is.
Yeah, I'm back. Can you hear me now?
Much better, much better. Yeah, please.
Okay, perfect. So I don't know where did you lose me, but what I was talking about is the land became a big challenge. And that happened in between while the projects were already being executed or PPA was signed with SECI, and many IPPs had signed those projects considering the land in Gujarat. But but suddenly the lands were and this went on, the fiasco went on for over a year. Of course, then certain uncontrollable factors such as COVID and or the Russia-Ukraine war also impacted us. You would have noticed the steel price hitting the roof or hitting the shed, and and supply, and most of the projects faced a lot of supply chain disruptions. So these have essentially been the bigger challenges that we as a nation are facing, and as I said, there needs to be complete alignment. I would while I hear most of us are saying that the subsidies or the free power needs to reduce, all that. While of course to a certain extent I agree, but to a certain extent I don't agree with this. Also because if you see most of the substantial part of the payables or the outstanding to discoms, if you notice, is essentially from various governments, government authorities, government bodies. I mean, they also don't clear their bills on time. It is, of course they may have their own stress, but the distress also is because how the political and bureaucratic system of the country is or has been working, irrespective of governments, to be honest. And we have completely lost the plot, in the sense that the efficiency. I mean, no one really cares about efficiencies in the system. There is so much of stress. I mean, we are still transmission network. I mean, we have not really spent any money on a transmission network. There's so much of transmission losses we have on power. I mean, it's not funny. So what I think is, of course, I mean, we need to relook at our subsidies. We need to relook at who deserves the subsidies without really getting more into detail about that. But we definitely need to relook. And those are not relooked again because of the political landscape of the nation. So these are essentially the points, Kaadambari. Most of it has been said already. by the fellow speakers. And I don't want to repeat it. Of course, I understand the constraint on time that we have in the session as well. So these are the additional points I want to touch base beyond what has already been spoken.
Thank you, Pathik. I think your inputs on how R&D is equally important as are the regulatory reforms.
Yeah, in fact, sorry, Kaadambari, one more point that I want to also touch base is that, when we're talking about alignment between center and state, I mean, imagine a PPS, the earlier PPS, we all know, were signed at a very high rates when we talk about renewable energy. But that was also because at that point of time, even the cost of generating renewable energy was pretty high. And, and all these bids are made basis certain business models, keeping certain business models in mind. Now, suddenly, few governments stand up and say, we want to cancel those PPAs. We want to rebid those PPAs. I mean, if that is how we're going to, we were talking about the sanctity of contracts. There's no intention. I mean, it's all being, I don't know what is the objective, or I mean, what's the mindset that we really come when we come to power, and I don't know what. I think we are very short. We have a very short-term vision as a nation or as governments, as I would say. So that those things need to really change. I mean, there's a lot that we need to improve upon if we want to reach even anywhere near to our targets of 2030. To be honest.
So just wanted to ask all the panelists. So would you say that you have a robust pressure group as of now, or it is just so disjointed, the entire sector, that because all these issues are commonly understood, and of course there are industry associations which are there, but I'm just wondering about the strength of this particular sector. What voice does it have? What would you have to say about that? So in fact, I put it to all the panelists that we all understand the issues and the apathy or not giving sanctity to the contractual obligation. In fact, I had handled a case recently. So I was for a public authority, and the issue which came up was again what you stated. The PPP was signed, and the money was not being given. And in fact, there were the officials who were the now incumbent officials were raising eyebrows at the rate at which it was settled, which is precisely the point that you've raised. And you're absolutely right, because as technology grows, the costs will come down. And that itself is a justification for certain PPPs which was signed earlier. And there is no reason for retrospectively, resigning those, giving a basis for resigning such contracts. So I was asking whether you feel, or since you all are from the sector, do you feel you have a voice in terms of any having a very robust industry association, or that's a gap too?
No, at least I see a lot of gap in that as well. There's a lot of gap there. We, as industry, of course, there are bodies. There are few bodies. Solar, renewable energy, wind, all have the bodies. But as of now, considering that, so to say, at least renewable sector is not a very old sector in the country. And everyone has its own challenges, and everyone has its own interests. So people are more focused about ensuring their own interests, and thus there is a huge gap, so to say, for a collective bargaining, if I may say, and that also needs to really bridge fast.
Surely, I think that is the need of the hour, because
Absolutely.
everybody So just one shot, before we wrap up, because already we have exceeded the time by 20-25 minutes. So would you?
I just want to add what Pathik has said, Kaadambari, just a 1 second, 5 second only. Of course, when you ask about the pressure group and the industry association, particularly on the issues relating to government taking a decision, going back on a contract and all that. What I have, because, and in fact, of course, I'm not directly from the power industry, but on these aspects, because so many incentive related litigations in my company, I'm actually driving, where we have to set up plans, and the government then ultimately said that no, we have promised the incentive, but now we are not going. The reason being that again, India is a welfare state, and the public interest element, the moment the government take a position on a public interest angle, especially on the contract, especially on those areas which directly impact the public. I have seen in the oil and gas also, government has the right intent. It's not the government is not having the right intent, maybe. But once the things, sometimes government takes a decision, maybe due to the public pressure or whatever reasons they take the decision, and the industry pressure group then tries to convince the government and try to make sense about it, but still government cannot do it, because that becomes so they become public conscious of their decision, how it will impact, and generally they better that okay, you go to the court, get a decision, and the things will serve. And the jurisprudence, what we call this as a promissory estoppel jurisprudence, has actually, from a legislator, I have seen it changing from north to south actually. So now no promise is something which is enforceable. That's the way it is there. So means I have seen it, the harsh side of this in last 1.5 years. So I can comment on that the pressure groups are there, they are all working, they managed to convince the government also. There is an intent also at some stages came, okay, you have makes sense, what you explained, it makes sense, maybe we might have taken decision, but once we go back to the data, we seems that it doesn't look, it doesn't create a right impression for the India as a country. But now what to do about the public interest and the way it has the issue has come up. So now the public may not think it in that right perspective if we take a decision. So that pressure groups, everything actually really didn't work, because the things reach courts and all that, and then everybody says let's wait for the court decision.
That is
right. In fact, just adding one point to this, Vineet or Pathik. See, because renewable sector is not an old sector, right? We say quite few years old, and everyone has their own interest to do, right? So all companies, the Indian INC has planned to reach to a highest number, whatever they can. Number one. Number two, the good part for Indian industry, Indian renewable sector was that it was being run at the top of our government. Like Prime Minister has his own intent to run this show and to have that international popularity for India. So that was the good part, where the hurdles were less as compared to the other sectors, which are not like, which are routine tasks of the government. Three, I think now the time has come where these things should be like with the industry forums, or we can represent to the government on those issues. And coming to the point that if the things are getting settled at the court level, so we should have some effective regulatory mechanism to resolve these infrastructure related issues fast. Because I know we have seen few cases, 5 years, 10 years are there, project is on stalled, but there is no decision from the court. End of the day, 5 years, 10 years after, if decision came, then that is the same thing, like my operation is successful, but my patient is dead. So that scenario should be improved. Like if the regulators are there, so regulators should take high priority matters on the high priority only and resolve the issues.
Great. I think that is the need of the hour. And I would say, legal era, are you listening? Maybe you can step in and fill in the gap. So I think with this, we should conclude the session. And thank you so much, all the panelists. The way you have, given the entire perspective, how this particular sector is evolving, the issues being faced by it, very, very succinctly, very, very, in a very detailed form. And one can, of course, hear the pain in the voice of, I think, all the panelists with regard to the issues which are not within the hands of the private sector, I would say. So we hope things go for a better turn now that the sector is maturing, as we have seen in other sectors. We've seen real estate with RERA, and even infrastructure, highways. We've seen rapid and very, very effective movement in those subsectors. But I think this is the sector which would really demand immediate attention from the topmost position in the country. And we hope that happens soon. So over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. What an interesting session that was. And as Kaadambari ji aptly summed up, because it was not only about looking at the opportunities that we have, but also understanding the challenges wherein the reach of private sector is not there. And that's very important to understand, especially looking at the new dynamics, both at the national as well as global governance level. So thank you so much, Kaadambari ji, Parvesh, Kheterpal ji, Vineet ji, Vikash Jain ji, Pathik, Arora ji, Vineet, Bose ji. Thank you. Gratitude to all of you. Many, many thanks for the wonderful insights with respect to the session on power sector with special focus on the renewable energy sector. Thank you so much.